Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that is taken aside, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation's building.
She is a beauty, beautiful Guyana, with wonderful people all over this country.
Globespan believes every Guyanese voice is part of the nation's building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana. As the world turns on its axis bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
With many flavor, 6 different people blended together. Raise your flag high in unity, we're family with one destiny. Raise your flag high in unity,
Welcome, viewers, listeners, to another edition of Globespan 24/7, owned and operated. As usual, our technical operator tonight is Mr. Devin Bassoon. This evening, there are 2 contemporary topics we're discussing: the Guyana budget, which was presented in Parliament last Friday, and the debate will continue this Friday. And we are also discussing President Trump's swearing in and some of his executive orders that were announced over the last summer. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Discussing these 2 topics tonight are 3 very eminent personalities. A senior counsel, who is no stranger to us, professor, again no stranger to us, and I don't know if a Wall Street investor, or a columnist, but a prolific writer. Ladies and gentlemen, you know them all quite well. I will not mention their names now, but I will begin first with the investor to tell us a little about the budget. Mr. G.H.K. Lau.
Oh, good evening, everyone. It seems like we were here just last week, but I think it was last year. Yes. All the best for the new year. Make the best of it, wherever you may be. Now, fellow contributors, Council Jonas and Professor Blackman, it's good to be here with you. And of course with you, Dr. Bisram. The budget. I think when we make a budget as an individual in a family, it is about how you take care of the house and the bills, and then you look out for some of the other things that you'd really like to do: education, health, and all those other things that speak to a standard of life, of living, a quality of life. We have another record budget, 1.386, 20% increase. And I would have thought that a budget that big, I think it's the 4th record one, a budget that big would give the people in this country who need a fillip, a boost, something more than they got. I think it's very rich in projects and plans, cheap electricity, of which all we know is what we've been told, 88 billion. We've got 209 billion for roads, and that jamboree goes on. And we've got $5,000 for pensioners. And we've got some income tax threshold raise and child tax credit, something that has been close to my heart for a while. And it seems that it took a couple of years to get there. But the extravaganza with the people's money, whether it's borrowed or oil or tax, continues. And I'm asking myself really whether we are getting, with all these records, whether we are really singing, whether we as the citizens, the mass, the multitudes, whether the budget is making an impact on our lives. 80 billion or 90, depends on what you read, for this fuel subsidy that has been there. Excise tax down to zero, good thing. And fuels freight subsidy, and you go down the line. But money in the pockets of Guyanese, you can't give them all one time. Where is that, and why is it so meager? Why is it so meager that we feel that those who need it feel that this budget ain't got nothing for me? And that's where my hiccups begin, my hang-ups start. And overall, a budget glittering in numbers, but kind of dull and dismal for the ordinary man, the man in the street, the family that struggles. I would have thought that the Honorable Minister of Finance, or whatever he's called, a Guyana scholar, would have found a moment to say something about the people who languish at $60,147. That's the minimum wage workers, in his 3-hour and 6 minutes address. He didn't. And I'm asking myself how much input and control the private sector had in that part of the conversation that didn't happen, and in the numbers that came up to 1.386 billion. Overall, and I think we are timing this thing tonight, overall, a budget that is big, a budget that has a lot of big ideas or continues them, and for the people, the richest people, among the richest people in the world, I want to know why the hell they feel so poor, or they don't feel that they got anything like riches coming close to them.
All right, let's get a New Yorker perspective. Professor Blackman.
Well, good evening to everyone. You know, it's always a privilege to join colleagues here on Globespan, and you know, I think this is a very important discussion that we're about to embark on, the Guyana's 2025 budget and the sort of broad intersection with U.S. policies under President Trump, or at least things that we might anticipate under Trump. You know, let me not be, since as GHK just mentioned, it's the new year. It seems like we were just here yesterday, so let me extend, you know, New Year's greetings to you, Dr. Bisram, and certainly to fellow panelists, GHK Lal and Senior Counsel Jonas for the new year. I think now to speak specifically to the budget, I mean, it's a record. It's as GHK just noted, it's 1.38 trillion Guyana dollars, right? I mean, it is the largest thing that we've seen as a budget in the history of Guyana, right? You know, the other thing that I think I want to start off with is the fact that, you know, the economy, Guyanese economy, and GHK alluded to this in terms of, you know, why do we feel so poor when we're so rich? But objectively, you have the economy expanding by about 44%. You have, you know, growth of close to 57, 58, 60% growth in the oil sector, about 12, 13% growth in the non-oil sector, and I think maybe at some point we'll come back to this. I think what I would highlight at the beginning would be, you know, some of the social measures, you know, the reintroduction of free college tuition at the University of Guyana, the obviously the one-time cash payment. I certainly, something's dear to my heart, the one-time payment for newborns. Obviously, I think power is an important thing. So, you know, whether or not it will actually happen that the electricity bills will be halved, I think this is a good aspiration to have. My sense is, and maybe GHK will correct me, I thought that there was some small increase in the minimum wage, but maybe there wasn't. As far as I was reading it, it seemed to me that there was some small increase in the minimum wage. So, I think the challenge for us, I can say more. I mean, I think we should, again, I'm not in Guyana, but I think it's important to acknowledge that, from the budget is, low debt to GDP ratio. It's the second lowest in the Western Hemisphere. What concerns me, I think most of all, is the substantial withdrawals from the National Resource Fund. I think that number was about 2.5 billion US dollars slated for 2025. And I think that, and if you look at where that started, it's grown, the withdrawals have grown by about 60%, starting from about $500 million 2 or 3 years ago. So for me, that raises some concerns that we should have about, long-term fiscal sustainability, the importance for, prudent management, and most importantly, avoiding over-reliance on these oil revenues. I'll pause there. I've kind of sketched out in abstract the big picture. I think, we can dive into the social spending. We can speak to some of the, environmental commitments. But I will pause. Again, always, whenever I'm with Attorney Janice and James, I always find myself being like too optimistic. So I'm just going to pause and give them a chance to temper me before I come back in here.
Good, great. So Senior Counsel Timothy Jonas. Timothy.
Thanks, Vish. Looking at the budget, I was pleasantly surprised to see that a couple of the items that I have in fact been advocating for and talking about are reflected, although in a much more diluted way than I would have liked. Look, we're getting tons of free money. There's so much money, the government almost doesn't know what to do with it. So at this stage, the question isn't necessarily how to budget and, tie the purse strings. There's a lot of money, and the important question is how to spend it in a manner that is fiscally responsible so you get value for money. And equally important is how to manage your budget so that the people at the bottom of the financial spectrum get the most benefit and have an opportunity for upward mobility. So a couple of suggestions had been made previously, and I'm really pleased to see that they are being implemented, although not nearly as much as they should be. The first thing GHK mentioned that I was happy to see is that the income tax threshold increased. Now, to go up to $130,000 is not enough. Somebody earning $650 US a month should not be paying tax if he goes up to $700 US dollars a month. I would have liked to see the income tax threshold at around 200,000. Now, my reason for saying that is that the amount of income which the GRA enjoys from a single taxpayer who is earning $150,000 is so minor in the grand scheme of things that it is easy for the GRA, and administratively it is far easier for them to make a concession there at the bottom. And that kind of concession will really be felt by the people who need it the most. Somebody who's earning $150,000, $175,000, $200,000. Put the tax threshold at $200,000 and the second level at maybe $350,000, $400,000. Now, the increase I was glad to see, not enough. Another thing I was very happy to see is the payments per child. I see they say that one parent will get $10,000 a month. For me, and I had advocated for this before, it shouldn't be one parent at random. It should be the mother, unless there are good grounds for it to go to the father. And there are reasons that I say this. We have a domestic violence issue in Guyana. And we need to find ways to make women financially autonomous, financially independent. We need to give them that comfort that they're not hidebound, they're not tied by financial duress to a domestic situation that is intolerable. To give them 10,000 per child is not enough, but 20,000 a child, if they've got 2 or 3 children, that might be enough to give them the kind of independence that with a job, they're suddenly free and can have autonomy and dignity. That is what you want. So for me, it should not be to one parent, it should be to mommy, to the mother. In addition, we find that most of our families are matriarchal. Daddy disappears, and if it is a broken home, it is usually mommy looking after the child. So I would like the preference to go to the mother. In terms of children born, again, as a child is born, not enough. But I would also like to see not just a sum of money that is not large going to directly to the hand of the mother. I'd like to see a much larger, more meaningful sum going into a bank account on trust for that child when he reaches the age of 18. So that at 18 or at 16, the child has a large fund that has been in the bank, so it's been in circulation in the Guyana economy, and can use that money for business or to pay for university or something like that. I would have liked to see more decentralization of the finances. Government is trying to control everything. So they got the gas to shore, they want to control that. Now they've taken over the university. To me, a better approach would have been to guarantee scholarships to Guyanese. And therefore, UG could have their enrollment criteria, could have financial autonomy, because anyone who goes has to pay for it. Right now, they are already finding themselves with a begging bowl every year asking the government for money. I don't like that lack of autonomy. And then the last thing I would have liked to see that I haven't seen here, going back to income tax, a differentiated income tax for Guyanese and for non-Guyanese. Non-Guyanese need to be pulling their weight, and I would like to see that if a Guyanese is paying income tax at a rate of 5%, the non-Guyanese is paying 5% plus something more. I believe that differentiation will make Guyanese more competitive in the job market, and it needs to be done. So those are some changes. Those are some things I like, but I would have liked to see more done. And again, I'm trying not to talk for too much, because I know that we're trying to keep it short. But for me, I'm seeing good. I'm also seeing that more needed to be done to help the people at the bottom, to make them upwardly mobile. And I wanted to see decentralization of control of the purse strings from the government. I'm seeing greater control of the purse strings by the government. And that, of course, lends to greater corruption. In Parliament.
You want to talk a little about the minimum wage? I noticed you were shaking. Yeah.
Yes. I stand to be corrected here, Professor Blackman, but I'm fairly certain that there was no reference at all to the minimum wage folks in the budget presentation, and nothing was said about that at all. And so this part here about the small increase that you mentioned, I haven't come across that at all since July 1st, 2022, when that minimum wage went to 60,147. It has stuck there, and nobody has said anything about it. You know, one of the things about that income tax increase and so on and so forth is that a man or a woman working for $60,000 a month here, first of all, how they survive, and secondly, that has no relevance to them. It doesn't touch them because they were already under the old $100,000 threshold. So the couple of extra $1,000 at 25% that they would have gotten, it's just not there. Now, jumping ahead, I know you're talking about minimum wage here. Jumping ahead, I'm looking at pensioners, 76,000 of them. $5,000 increase. Forget about reference to the PNC and what was done in 15 to 20 and all that business. We have the money now, and $5,000, I think, is a slap in the face to the old people in this country. And $10,000. Nobody's asking for $25,000, although that would be nice, or 30 or whatever. I think $10,000 would be a healthy little boost that would have been well received. If this is what we are doing, and this is the jumping ahead, and then I'll let go of the microphone. This is where we are at 43.6% economic growth. What are we going to do at 10.6%, gentlemen? What are we going to be able, how are we going to be able to manage? What kind of scaling back are we going to be talking about? Or is it in anticipation of that we are so constricted in terms of the numbers in relative to social spending? At people at the bottom of the pyramid, as senior counsel said, those things are meaningful to me because I deal with the people here. I think more than most. I have a good appreciation, maybe discernment of how they are battling to cope, and it's really a struggle. It's an uphill struggle. So you talk about $5,000 in a month. What's that? $60,000 a year in a $1.386 trillion budget. It's not even a drop in the purse. It's almost non-existent. We are talking about 2.8% inflation, and let's not mistake cost of living with inflation. They are related, but one is a subset of the other, in using my words, and 5.6 or 8% food inflation. Where that number was obtained from, or how that calculation was arrived at, I would like to know. I know Professor Blackman is a mathematician, and he may be able to enlighten me and us on how you get there when everything is high and higher, and so that's where we are. And we are talking just about price of food. I'm not talking about a whole package about rent and light bill and water bill and that kind of business. But so the budget is here. It has its bright spots, as I said. It has its incentives, but overall, for the citizens of the most talked about country in the world, the most watched country in the world, this has to be a down moment, and a down moment that's going to last throughout the year until those cash grants come in the middle of the year and then closer to elections.
Civil servants, I think government workers, the minimum wage has been increased to 100,000.
I think it's more than that. 94. Yeah, plus they are due for a raise in this year pursuant to the union agreement that was just signed.
Yeah, so in a sense, sorry. In preparation, I had looked at the PDF document to the budget. Means I didn't read it in its detail, but I did look up, public sector monthly minimum wage. And so when I looked at it, I guess I read, I'm now looking at it again, and it's 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23. That's part of the appendix of the budget statement, and so it reflected some small increases. So I just assumed that this increase would carry through in the current setup. So I'll go look specifically for that. But if one looks in the appendix under selected socioeconomic indicators under public sector monthly minimum wage, because I did check just like what's the minimum wage? Did it do anything on the minimum wage? So I just assumed, perhaps not reading carefully.
I think the president did say just before Christmas that the minimum wage for all public sector employees, the minimum wage will be 100,000.
Yeah, so then there is some small increase there from 86,000.
Yes, they got an increase. They did. Is it 100 or is it 94? Well, whatever. They got an increase. Yeah.
No, but your point is well taken, GHK. I mean, these are almost figures that don't constitute a drop in the ocean in that $1.3 trillion budget, right? And I think the point that you're making is one which I sort of hoped to kind of center on, which is, if you look at the thing holistically, what you have are sort of like this infrastructure and public investments. You have, social services, health, your education, your housing. You have these sort of social transfers, employment support. You have your debt servicing, and then sort of broadly sort of governance, oil, gas, and the others. And I think the largest part of the budget, and it's double in size at the next largest, is around infrastructure and public investments. And so on your, as Attorney Jonas was saying, on your social services, i.e. your health, your education, your housing, you're just about 25%. On infrastructure and public investments, you're close to 55%. And I think that is the fundamental issue. It's obvious that the priority is to fund infrastructure. I can see the logic of making these infrastructure investments. It's sort of, if you're going to derive the benefit from infrastructure, you have to build it now and you have to build it fast so that it's there for a long time. But I also can see that, the question that you've just put on the table, which is, you have a $1.3 trillion budget and everyone is sad. Or a vast, well, certainly the people who are doing the infrastructure and public investments are probably not that sad. But the vast majority of people who are part of the other economy are not benefiting in a substantial way from this largesse. And that is a question of priorities, and I think that is where the political people have to fight for priorities. They have to decide whether or not they want a different balance between infrastructure spending and social services spending, between social transfers and employment support and infrastructure. I think that's a conversation that has to happen in the political class within the context of Guyana about, you said it correctly. The budget is about a vision. The vision that is expressed in this budget is to say, our strategy is we're going to build as many things as we can build first, and hopefully they work, and then we use that as a platform on which to grow everything else. There are lots of problems with that strategy in the sense that you actually have to have people to maintain the things that you've built. You have to build them appropriately so that it's not being built in a shoddy manner that will require it being built again. But it is a strategy, and one can argue about the strategy, but it is a strategy, and it reflects a definite priority. And I think that the contesting political ideas should say we have a different strategy, and our strategy is not to spend so much on infrastructure, but here is the balance that we think is better for Guyana at this moment. I don't want to say what I think is the balance that's better for Guyana at this moment, but I'm here as an analyst, and I'm just suggesting that. So, point well taken. I read the public sector minimum wage and increase, but it's not, to your point, an increase of the kind of substance that fundamentally changes the reality of the lives of the person who's receiving that within the context of Guyana.
GH, you have a point in that?
Yeah, a quick one before we get to Council Jonas. I hear you about priority, Dr. Blackman. I think what would be really more appealing, what would grab hold of Guyanese more, would be, and I heard you also say that, if we can have a budget that shows some semblance of balance between infrastructure spending and all the other spending and spending on people, especially when so much money, billions of US is taken out of the oil fund. I am an owner of that. What does it mean for me?
I don't think anyone opposes spending money on infrastructure, but there was some commentary this week that the roads are crumbling. I mean, a terrible construction of roads. I think several news had an editorial.
You really want to go there? Mm-hmm.
Senior Counsel Timothy Jonas.
Well, before I go to the quality of infrastructure, and I think that's where what I was talking about when I mentioned spending in a way that's fiscally responsible. There needs to be a system in the award of contracts and monitoring how the contracts are performed so that you get value for money. There's a complete absence of that. And we have seen tacit admissions by the government that there's been an absence of any kind of quality performance, any kind of quality assurance. The 5:30, the famous 5:30 in the morning meeting, where you're quarreling with engineers and talking about timelines and that kind of thing. The haranguing of the GPL people and saying heads will roll. The reading the riot act, I quote, to the Gaisuko folk and saying we need better production. All of those high-handed, dictatorial, cuss downs are symptoms, strong indications that your systems are not working. And when your systems aren't working, that is a fault of the CEO. That's not a fault of mid-level management or the employees. That's the CEO's fault. Now, Terence made a point of talking about human resources and your workforce. In the public service, the engineers are insufficiently numbered and insufficiently qualified to monitor the huge number of contracts now being awarded. The engineers are also so oppressed by their bosses that when a contract is awarded to family and friends, they don't have the courage and they don't have the dignity in their job and their job security to be able to say to that contractor, you haven't done the job well, I'm not signing off that this contract is performed or that this stage is performed. So we have shoddy work by money grubbing people who are not patriots and don't give a damn about the country and are happy to roll a half-inch of asphalt onto a road and pretend that they've made a road. And the one truck passes and you see the mud squelching up at the side, you see potholes in the middle, and that is what we're having. Now, that is not a discussion of budget, so to speak, because I support the expenditure on an improved infrastructure. But it is how the money is being spent. It is the blind eye that is turned to the corruption and the cronyism and the lack of oversight and management. I would have liked to see a discussion about decentralization of the award of contracts. The government is so determined to hold all the purse strings that they're awarding contracts building little roads in all the villages. That should be the function of the NDC and the RDC. Rates and taxes should be assessed so that the people living in Lusignan, living in LBI, living in BV, are paying rates and taxes sufficient to maintain the infrastructure in those neighborhoods. We are seeing huge housing schemes going up all over the place in Grove, in Sophia, in Demerara Estates, but we're not seeing rates and taxes being applied, and we're not seeing it being monitored in a systemic way so that the NDCs in those areas can pay for the growing infrastructure to deal with the parapets, the drains, the rubbish, and the roads. If that was done properly, central government would be able to concentrate its funds on what central government should be dealing with, which is building highways into the agriculture belt, into the mining belt, into the Rupununi, to Brazil, to Suriname, so that there is a network more accessible to help agriculture, to help mining, which will be our core economy growth. And the NDCs and the RDC should be doing their jobs to help improve the infrastructure where they are. That's not happening. And we're getting poor, shoddy workmanship by a single government who, just like the Central Committee of Khrushchev's Russia, wants to control everything in a central committee without understanding that it is only by decentralizing that you will really have an economy that is self-sufficient, working well, and with proper oversight. I would have liked to see discussions on a corps of engineers to be developed in the public service and a system that they can sufficiently monitor the award of contracts. If you're awarding contracts and nobody monitoring them, you will have shoddy work. That's what we've seen. I'd like to see the development of the GDF as a corps of engineers with easy options for education and civil engineering, bridges, drains, sea defenses, so that when you go into the GDF, you go in excited and anticipating the opportunities for training in those areas, and the GDF being used for building roads, for building bridges, just like the local reserve is in the States, in Louisiana, and those places. It's not inventing something new. It's being done properly elsewhere, and you can see it being done, but we are not seeing proper use of manpower. And because of that, the cronyism, the corruption continues, and that is how the money is being spent. But that is not a criticism of the budget, because we do need to fix our infrastructure. We're just not going about it the right way.
Okay, any final points about the
Yeah,
budget?
so I would make one point there, and I think on that, I think the point is, look, like it or not, Guyana is at a critical place, and this oil revenues, you're either going to win or lose with it. Seems to me that if you're planning on winning with it, you need the infrastructure investments to kind of unlock the economic. You got to invest in transportation, in energy, in public utilities, etc. If you're going to jump the gap. And I perhaps want to say here, as someone looking in, that given all of the problems that have been just described, that maybe doing 55% in infrastructure is leaving you with insufficient space to develop out the human capital, education, healthcare, etc. And so perhaps what we ought to be adjusting down is to say, someone should be saying, look, let's bring the infrastructure spending down to 40%, 45%. Let's up the health and education spending to about 30% or so. We have the kind of, the cash grants, etc. We have that around about maybe 10%. You see, you can form a matrix that reflects the priorities for where you are as a country today. But I say all that to say, but I don't think you want to, you reduce the spending on infrastructure, you redirect some of the spending towards the population directly, but you don't want to be in a place where you're not spending on infrastructure today, because if you're not spending on infrastructure today, you're going to miss the opportunities that are there tomorrow. So, that's my 2 cents there. You can adjust the matrix, but I don't think you can bring it down from 55 to 40, and that will still get you where you need to go. And you can increase the health and education spending from 25 to 35, and that will perhaps be more optimal in terms of the direction that Guyana is going. And that would be an argument for the political people to have.
Yes, I agree. You could realign.
I didn't hear you.
So that you could spend more money in social services. At the end of the day, as GHK Lal pointed out earlier, people can't eat the roads. And having said that, though, there are more and more vehicles that are being registered. I'm told it's like 12,000. Is it 12,000 a month, 12,000 a year? That's a lot of vehicles that are registered. Yeah.
Well, you see, but it's to be expected. Once you become wealthy, you buy a car, and then if you become wealthier still, you'll buy a bigger car.
That's right.
So I think we have to see that that's a natural progression. The man at the bottom who we're advocating for will want a car too. I mean, he or she is not going to want to only travel by motorbike or by bicycle when everyone else around you is traveling in a big car. So I think we have to plan for that. And so that's why I'm saying these roads and so on are not completely crazy, but you're right. You can't eat them, but you need roads to go to work that can get you there in an efficient time. You need a bridge across I was rereading a few days ago some work by some papers that Joe Holder had shared with me around the history and some of the debates of building the Demerara Harbor Bridge. And I saw this really nice photo of the new fixed bridge and, the old Demerara Harbor Bridge still kind of working its way. And I think the point is we need the infrastructure. You need a bridge. Now, you know, we built bridges before. There were sort of our national symbols. Maybe we're not doing them in exactly the same way that we did them before, and maybe there's something about that spirit about how we did them before. But I want to say to my brothers in Guyana and sisters in Guyana, say, infrastructure investments are key to unlocking the economic potential of the country. And you know, human capital development is also important. But in this moment, I think you have to decide what the optimal balance between human capital development and infrastructure. And I'm not sitting on Regent Street, so, but I can offer that view.
We also need to start thinking about mass transit. At some point in time, the number of vehicles on the road, there wouldn't be sufficient space on the road. We'll probably end up worse than New Delhi or Mumbai, where you have cars that are not going anywhere. So mass transit would be a way to address that issue. What we haven't dealt with the political economy of the budget. Timothy Jonas did talk about national control over the budget. It's an election season, an election year. So obviously any government that is in charge would want to maximize benefits of incumbency. Any comments on that? GHK?
I think I just want to pick up where what we've been talking about every time we talk about money and spending on this program is that we need, just bear with me a moment here, we need infrastructure. You go on the roads, and as much rivers that we have around here, as many rivers as we have around here, lots of stuff related to economic activity is moving around by trucks, is moving around by containers. So we need those roads and bridges. My issue, my contention is that does it have to be so much year after year where the population that needs a helping hand is held hostage and is being thrown these paltry morsels to help them or to keep them quiet so that and keep them going along. However, the balance, the skew, the tilt doesn't have to be so pronounced. I hear about 40%. That may be too steep for 55 to 40. I think it should be 45. We know about the human intervention aspect, the oversight aspect, and what are we doing there? Goal is not going to help us there. I purposely stayed away from that in my comments about that project, that situation here. But I'm thinking that so much money is taken out of the oil fund to go back to where I am, and people in this country feel that they are worse off than before. They see the infrastructure. You talk, Dr. Bisram, about soon. I don't think it's soon that there'll be too many cars and there's no space to move. It is here. It is here. I live with it. So I use taxis and let them navigate through the traffic. I park my car on the bridge and that's it for me. Because the more roads we build, it seems that the more congested the urban areas are. Currently, not tomorrow, today. So mass transit, planning, forward planning, yes, definitely. Is that going to happen? I don't see that, quite frankly, to be on the cards. I don't see that happening here, and at least not for the next 5-10 years. I could be wrong here, but I'm going to put a stake in the ground on that from now. Now, political part of the budget. Again, it goes back to what Council Jonas said. Control. It's control and the doling out of monies, hundreds of millions of dollars in highly speculative and suspicious circumstances, and 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 we don't know what we are getting for it. Take this cash grant. Take this cash grant. Dr. Singh said somewhere in the vicinity of 90,000 checks were cut. 90,000 checks were cut. You multiply that by $100,000, and if I remember well, there was a $30 billion portion in the supplementary budget for cash grants. 90,000 checks by 100,000 is $9 billion. Something is missing somewhere there, but nobody's talking about that. And so that is why they have to be this political control of the spending at the centralized level, at this Kremlin-like level, so that all the other things that have become characteristic of Guyana, cultural in Guyana, the corruption I'm talking about, can continue, in that whoever is rewarded, and so they know which hand buttered their bread. And so that circus goes on. I think that the monies in the budget are being used by the political leadership, and this one is no different from the other. No, I don't think anyone is different from the other, is that they're using this bonanza in their hands for purposes that are not national. This business about national development priorities is really a farce, and that's the control of the spending, the control of the awards, the people in the right people in the right place, the people who will sign off, and so it's a whole chain reaction, here. And from the start, the system is fixed and skewed against getting 75 cents on the dollar, and that is deliberate, it is tactical, and it rewards those who are in control of it. We, the people who should be getting that benefit, I hear about the roads being used for getting farm products to the markets. Where is that price differential? Where is that benefit to the man in the street? And so I think that the political aspect of the budget is very, very much too present, and it's been to the detriment of this country.
You want to add anything to that, Professor? I'm sorry, Timothy Jonas?
Yes, thanks, Fish. GHK, there's one thing I'm glad that you said, because when we're talking about a budget and we're talking about money, everybody likes to make it political, So the pro-government people will say, look at all the money spent on roads and infrastructure. How can you criticize this thing, praises to the government? And the opposition will say, oh, you're not looking after poor people. How terrible. And if the shoe's on the other foot and the other side was in power, it would be exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. Money has got to be spent on infrastructure. Money has got to be spent on human resources, and we could talk percentages. So I don't want to go down the political road, because that is a dead end. We are so corrupt and we are so entrenched in our views that it's hopeless to try to reach a solution that way. I want to keep it on dollars and cents. And for me, the key is what you also said, that decentralization. Now, to give you an example, you mentioned the cash handouts. I'm sorry, I'm trying to sort out my laptop. You mentioned the cash handouts. The reason that money is being given by cash handouts is because the ministers like the photo up, where they're shaking somebody's hand and some poor supplicant is saying, thank you, mighty minister, you're a deity next to a god, we love you, and collecting their white envelope. It's a lovely political gimmick. It also centralizes it and lends to lack of accountability. I've advocated many times, and I'll say it again and again, we need to create a system where we empower our NIS, our National Insurance Scheme, as an autonomous agency that should be equipped to be dealing with disability benefits, child benefits, unemployment benefits, all of the medical benefits, should be equipped to do that already. That instead of cash handouts, that is done through the NIS to a population which is registered, exists on an electoral list, is registered already, and happens automatically, money going to bank accounts. It needs to be done as a matter of right and as a matter of a system. And to ensure autonomy of the NIS when you get its budget, a couple things you need to do, because we're already deep in the oil curse and we have to try to pull back from this dependency. I would advocate increasing the age of retirement. We need to be paying for a longer period of time, because as life expectancy increases, if you're retiring at 55 and you got the next 30 years that you're taking money out of the NIS, that needs to change. It's not financially feasible. We need to be increasing the amount that we're paying. Right now, NIS has a ceiling. They don't want to take more than a certain amount of money from you. And there are people in Guyana earning millions who are paying $20,000 a month. That shouldn't be. It should be a realistic reflection of your income so that more money is there. If more money is there in the till, then you don't find yourself with the embarrassing situation that you are saying you're giving your public assistance people 100 US a month. Your people who are disabled, who cannot work, 100 US a month. You're giving your old people, your pensioners, $200 a month. You know, you judge a society by certain things. You judge a society by how it treats its sick, how it treats its elderly. And right now, on the basis of that judgment, we are a disgrace. And that needs to change. But it can change as a system. Empower the NIS, give it the tools. Just like in the award of contracts, you need to have a core of engineers monitoring performance. You need, as a system, to have an NIS administering these benefits that you are going to be paying out as a system, as a matter of right. I would like to see that happening.
One final point about the budget. Professor Blackman made reference to increasing the avenues of earning money rather than depending on the oil sector alone. I don't think that's practical, pragmatic, realistic at this point in time. As long as oil money is coming in, I think that any government would want to dip into that NRF. Any comments on that?
No, I would say that's actually one of the more important things. This question of economic diversification. This growth in the non-oil sector is going to be. I hate to get biblical, but I was chatting with someone and I said, it's like you get a blessing, you got to figure out how to get it to go to a rainy day, and a rainy day will come. Make no mistake about that. A rainy day will come. And so we need to think very carefully about, our rice production. We need to think very carefully about, tourism. We need to think, the Dutch disease is real, and you're going to see these rising wages in the oil sector. It will divert labor from the traditional sectors. And so it's really important that there be a focus on the economic diversification, and not as a kind of afterthought, but as a front thought, because it's going to be precisely that will save us when this boom moment is over, and then you actually have to live on what you have when the tide goes out. And so, I would say that, the financial management that's going on now kind of maybe begin to rein in the spending down of the NRF. This economic diversification is really, really important. Rebalancing the spending so that there's some balance between the social spending and the infrastructure spending. And actually, one thing which we haven't talked about, which as a note, the business about the environmental commitments with the indigenous communities and the carbon credit sales and so on. I think those are extremely important. And things that we should continue to do. There is an indigenous community. Whose livelihoods we ought to be concerned with in a very significant manner in this moment, and one would want to see that. But yes, I want to emphasize, put an exclamation point on the economic diversification place. Yeah.
Professor Blackman, while I have you on the floor, can you talk a little about President Trump's inauguration and some of the policies and our country here in Guyana?
Well, I mean, let's start with this question of energy, right? In his inaugural speech, I mean, President Trump sort of said, "Drill, baby, drill," right? And so he aims to increase U.S. oil production. Well, we all know the economics. The more of a commodity that you have in the market, the less likely. That's his stated goal, is to drive down the price of gas in the United States, right? So this necessarily means that the costs for Brent crude for Guyana, even for its special sweet light crude, will perhaps go down over the time of President Trump's time. So foreign relations. I mean, I think we should anticipate sort of strengthening ties with the Trump administration, given given the shared interest in energy, right? I think we can talk for a while on what I think could unfold in Venezuela, in the U.S.-Venezuela relations, and how those relations might impact Guyana. I think we can talk some about that. And then I also think something to be mindful of is Trump's immigration policies. I mean, Trump has made very clear that he is going to act in a very serious way as it relates to immigration, and I have no doubt that this will impact the Guyanese diaspora here in the United States, and I think we ought to begin to monitor we ought to monitor these developments, and we begin to understand their potential impact on our community. It's not immediately clear, but it's quite sure. I'm quite sure that we're going to see undocumented Guyanese who are picked up and deported, Guyanese who are alien, who are not American citizens, but perhaps residents who have committed a crime which brings them to the attention of the police and find themselves being deported. So I think this will also impact kind of the relationship that Guyana has with the United States. So yes, I mean, I think President Trump will have a significant impact. His administration will have a significant impact on Guyana. And we could speak more to some of the other aspects, but I think energy, and foreign relations and immigration policy.
Yesterday, today, that foreign immigrants, undocumented immigrants who give birth.
I mean, the birthright citizenship policy is already under attack. Right? He signed an executive order to end birthrights. And you see, everyone imagines that this just goes to questions of people who are in the United States in an undocumented fashion. But there are many categories of people who are in the United States to whom this new sanction would apply. So one hopes that we will see a challenge in the court, and I've read that there are challenges that will appear in the court. I mean, certainly, I don't know to what extent. I've listened to some aspects of. Recently, I saw one of the embattled sort of police officer talking about the government and diversity policy and so on. I mean, Trump's executive orders today ends all diversity activities on the part of the U.S. federal government. So, I mean, broadly, he's saying that perhaps this is not a policy that he wants to pursue. How does that get filtered through in terms of the countries with which the United States has engagement? So, I think the Trump presidency is going to be a very impactful one for Guyana, and one would hope that our foreign service individuals are plotting their broad strategic path in terms of the critical thing being Venezuela and its kind of relationship with Guyana as it relates to our being having access in a legal manner to the oil fields that are creating these massive budgets that we've just been describing. So there are many things I can say here, but I will pause and give my colleagues a chance to speak.
THK on this.
Well, I think the incumbent government here is pretty delighted at the beginning of the Trump presidency. I understand there's a billboard somewhere. There was a full-page ad in the Starbuck News. And I'm saying to myself, my God, this should be the role of American citizens, especially the Appalachian Americans from that belt. But so make no mistake, welcome and red carpet and garlands and whatever else. Now, I'm going to undocumented, that goes to the 14th Amendment. And already, I think, up to now, 22 states have signaled that they're going to resist this.
Yeah.
So he's withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accord, but that needs congressional clearance. We've got to understand that immigration is emotional, it's a visceral issue for Americans. I think that the Biden administration pandered too much in terms of what was done at the border, what was done in the sanctuary city, including in New York, and which tied Mayor Adams's hands, where neighborhoods were ruined, and so it really galvanized it connected to a backlash. The Hispanic vote that was counted on did not happen as much as it should for the Democrats, and so President Trump is there. I anticipate hundreds, as you said, Professor Blackman, I anticipate hundreds of deportees back to Guyana. How we're going to deal with that, given our policing, our crime situation, I don't even want to think about that right now. That's one. People being stopped at the John F. Kennedy Airport, that ain't going to happen anymore, right? So let's get that clear. And I think that's a boon for the PPP government. That's one thing they don't have to worry about, whether it's police officers or ministers or whomever, and who have to go through Panama and then go around from Afghanistan to avoid going into the States and all that nonsense, right? So that's over. The fact of the matter is that oil is pivotal to this country. And yes, I hear that point about diversification of the economy, and I agree. But I want to stick in this quick point before I go back to Mr. Trump. I am usually looking at what's going on the roads. And the workers that are on the roads at 6 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. in the morning are all speaking Spanish. They don't have any Guyanese people on the road, or at least I don't see them. And they are in clusters, and they're hustling to catch a truck or something to go somewhere. Guyanese maybe are already sitting back and saying, let the money come to me. Anyhow, Mr. Trump is here with us, and I wanted to stick that in. So about diversification of the economy, it's already being hampered by that. Mr. Trump here, oil is big for him. I think as a businessman, it can go two ways in Venezuela. He can say, I'm going to teach you a lesson. Your head is hard. That's Nicolas Maduro. We're going to show you the reach of American power. Or he can say, listen, let's make a deal. And I think as a natural, instinctive deal maker, he could cut a deal with Venezuela, which is not the best thing that could happen to us. This may cause some raised eyebrows, etc., but it may not be the best thing for Guyana with our business and all of that story. Exxon is going to sit even prettier here. I think that, well, our EPA was useless to begin with, so I think any kind of restraint there is gone. Oil is going to be produced more, but it's going to be produced, I think, in a down market, because drill baby drill from Trump has implications for Guyana. Oversupply, driving down the prices. Our economy is so dependent on oil money And we have already factored, well, I don't know if we factored in, but we are talking about the economy, the growth going to 10.6%. Ladies and gentlemen, listening, watching, that's a 75% drop. I won't call it a slump, although one of the media agencies has said a projected slump. But to go from 43.6% to 10 point, I think 6, that's steep. That's steep in such a short space of time. And so with more oil, more drilling happening, and wherever it's happening in the United States, Trump pulling out of the Paris Accord, and I think that may go through. I mean, the Republican Party controls the Congress. So here, we are going to have this oil, 674,000 barrels a day right now, and we may be selling that at not something less than $80 a barrel. That has significant meaning for our economy. And you can trace the origins of that back, not the market forces, but to the policy being stirred or being expressed by Mr. Trump. So definitely energy, definitely immigration. I'm watching at how he is going to deal with the border, and I'm not talking about Texas. We're talking about Venezuela with Mr. Caracas over there, Mr. Maduro, and it's not as much as the PPP government, and I don't think the PNC is going to do anything different. Might be a little bit more subtle about it in terms of the overtures and say, we are here with you. We understand you. And we don't care what anybody say about you. So we are with you. Here's the story. This thing is going to be negatively impacting this country, this man's presidency. And I haven't gone to the demagogic part about it and the racist part. Let the Americans deal with that. We are going to have some fallout here.
Mm-hmm. Timothy Jonas, you will have the final word.
Thank you. I think GHK explained and hit the nail on the head why the Democrats lost. They had these traditional demographics that the blue collar folk were the liberal folk. You know, you needed sex equality, race equality, immigrants needed to be treated nicely, that kind of thing. Traditionally, that was the blue collar working class liberal approach. And the Democrats believed, without, I think, looking at it seriously, that continued, and it doesn't. What happened in the States is that those same blue collar folk saw the immigrants as a threat to their livelihood and became much more conservative. So when Donald Trump said, we're closing these borders, the Democrats lost the fight right away, because those same blue collar folk, brown skin, black skin, and white skin, all of them, they wanted to hear that. That is where they viscerally felt threatened in their pocket, and they wanted to hear that these foreigners are not going to be allowed to come in to do the same jobs they're doing for less money and make them lose their jobs. Now, what does that translate into a policy? I don't want to speak in absolutes, but we do have to remember that unlike our dear land, the systems in the States are autonomous and work quite well. So one man signing a piece of paper, unless the system allows him to do that, is not going to change very much. So I heard that he signed this piece of paper that they call a presidential order to say you can't get citizenship if you're born there anymore. There's no doubt that's going to be subject to legal challenge because their systems work. And I doubt he will succeed, but we will see. Time will tell. But he is going to have a fight in his hands every step of the way. And one thing with the gentleman is his marketing is very good. So during that fight, the press will be spinning in a way that makes him look good, and the public will learn about it in a way that makes him look good. But we will see what the end result is. There is absolutely no doubt that his personal knowledge base and his personal ethos and policy is much more narrow than what is required for a serious foreign policy of a country like America. And I don't think that his narrow comments about Panama Canal and Canada and Greenland can be treated as reflecting seriously the policy considerations of that enormous and well-oiled machine that is the American administration. So any signs saying that we're no longer part of the Paris Accord, as GHK said, in the States, they have a system that when the country signs a treaty, that treaty is not binding until it's ratified by Congress. So you don't unbind it until the unbinding is ratified by Congress. He doesn't do that by a signature. Their systems work, and their systems are well-tuned and well-oiled, and there are autonomous people secure in their office, dignified and competent, who will try to carry a fight. Now, insofar as we're concerned, time will tell if we see Guyanese coming back here. But I don't think we have any say in that. So all we can do is try to be prepared to request information and to be prepared. We did see a large influx of deportees over 10, 15 years ago. There was an influx and we had to accommodate that. I don't think that this influx will necessarily be that quality. This may be more honest working class people who simply were going for a better lifestyle and are sent back, and therefore may be able to integrate better into the society. Jobs are not as scarce in Guyana now for people with education, but we have to continue. I say continue, that's optimistic. We have to structure our economy based on our budget to enlarge our agriculture base and our mining base, because that is our core. And if we do that, we will be able to absorb people who come back, but we have no choice anyway. So I think we got to check on our economy. We got to see where our focus is and let the chips fall how the chips fall in mighty America.
Well, that's nice. Beautiful summary that brings us back to the budget. Devin, before we close, is there any questions from the audience? I guess there isn't any.
No, Dr. Bistram.
No. Okay. So we're going to close off. Any final points from any of the panelists?
No, I would just say that on this matter, the Marco Rubio was confirmed as the Secretary of State. There's one should check that the names of Carlos Trujillo, Mauricio Clever Carone. So Trump will have a serious emphasis on Latin America and the Caribbean that is focused around energy, and it's important for us in Guyana to really be nimble about how this might affect the U.S., how the U.S.-Venezuela dynamics affects the border controversy between Guyana and Venezuela, and it's very important that Guyana remain vigilant in addressing Venezuela's territorial claims and continuing, as we've said before, to leverage international support to maintain its sovereignty over the entirety of the country that we know as Guyana.
Well, let that be the final word. I thank you all very, very much, Senior Counsel Timothy Jonas, Professor Terence Blackman, Mr. G.H.K. Lowell, and the audience for giving up your time this evening to listen to a very, very informative. I think this is one of our best discussion and analysis that I've had for the period of time that I've been a moderator. Thank you again, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All the best.